Good morning, everybody, and afternoon, and all the other respective time zones. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Share.Solve.Evolve. We'll give everybody just another bunch of people are still chiming in here, so we'll give them a minute to enter before we kick this off. They're our esteemed guests and host. All right, I think we've got just about a minute and a half after here. So again, welcome to the latest iteration of Share.Solve.Evolve. This is a webinar series that Intrada's put together to bring professionals in this 911 industry together and share ideas and information and come to some conclusions as well, because we know this industry loves to talk to one another because everybody's facing the same challenges every day, and bring people together. And guess what? We can almost solve anything, almost at any rate. And so for today's conversation, we're focusing on empowering PSAPs to overcome technology adoption challenges. We have three esteemed panelists here and our host, Jeremy DeMar. I am your moderator. I am not Marie, but my name is Andrew Rotherham. I'm VP of Marketing here at Intrado, and it's my pleasure to act as your moderator today. Joining us as our guest panelists, we have James Lake, who is the 911 coordinator and Center Director of Charleston County, South Carolina. We have Michelle Potts, Communications and Technology Manager of Cardinal Police Department in Arizona. And then we have Brad Flanagan, the Emergency Operations Manager at Pimpkin County, Colorado. So with that, how about we go ladies first, and I turn it over to Michelle, who can introduce herself.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Potts, and I am the Communications Technology Manager for the Chandler Police Department. Chandler is just outside of Phoenix, so we're in the metro region, and we have a population of about 280,000 community members. Been in the business for about 27 years. Most of that was in the operations side, and a couple of years ago moved over to the technology, so communications technology, real-time crime center, and emerging technologies for the police department. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And Jim, coming to us live from IWCE.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Lake. I'm from Charleston County, South Carolina. I manage and lead some amazing people. We do some awesome things. We are definitely dipping our toes in new technology and the challenges it faces as we try to adopt those new technologies. And just for official reference, I've been in the business over 45 years. I'm the old guy in the room.
Well, thank you, sir, and welcome. And then last but certainly not least, Brad.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I guess that makes me the baby of the room. I've got 15 years in public safety. I am the Emergency Operations Manager for Pimpkin County 911. Where the home of Aspen, Colorado. We have only 17,000 residents, but we get about 50 to 70,000 at a time in for the skiing and some of the better known partying in the state of Colorado. So yeah, I'm also the co-chair with Michelle of the Future Think Committee with Nina. So we're looking at what can happen 5, 10, and 20 years into the future in 911 to see how we can better prepare the industry and our agencies for these upcoming challenges and technologies.
Well, awesome. Welcome, Brad. And again, welcome to all our panelists. Before I turn it over to our host here, Jeremy DeMar, a couple of housekeeping issues. You will notice, should you have any questions throughout today's session, across the top of your team screen, you should see a Q&A button. Go ahead, press that Q&A, and you can type in any question that you have. And we will either repeat that question for all, or one of our panelists will jump into that chat and help you out with that. And again, this is, we were just checking, and we should have fact checked before we started. We think this is our sixth webinar in the series. You can go to our website at intrado.com, find all the previous ones. And again, these are great opportunities to learn, not from us, but from your colleagues and your peers. And so with that, I will bow out of camera. I'll come back at the end and turn it over to Jeremy.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew, and welcome everyone to the session. Super excited to be here. And I am also broadcasting live from lovely and far warmer than Springfield, Massachusetts, Orlando, Florida. My colleague there, Jim Lake, is actually over at the convention center. I, as you can see, am in my hotel room, so hopefully my internet speed will hold up here and there won't be any unnecessary lag or anything. But super excited to be hosting three of my very dear friends and longtime colleagues in the business. Prior to my joining Intrado as senior product manager, I spent almost 20 years on the public-facing side of 911, most recently as a director of two different centers. But it afforded me the opportunity to meet some really incredible people, three of which are on the panel today. So again, just super excited to be here and really just share some open dialogue with you about kind of the evolution of 911, where things are going, and where we're headed as an industry. Just to give you a little bit of background on this, so the Share.Solve.Evolve series, as Andrew pointed out, was really designed to kind of bring forward-facing, forward-thinking, disruptive type technology topics to the forefront for open discussion. And this gives folks in this viewing these particular series an opportunity to kind of inject, ask questions of the panelists. We like to try to keep it interactive. So as Andrew mentioned, feel free to throw questions into the chat, I think via Q&A as we go along there. And if we don't get to it during the course of the session, we'll absolutely try to address that at the end. And if we do run over, which I'm hoping we won't, we'll definitely get back to you with those answers. But without further ado, let me kind of dive in. So the way that we kind of set this up is we meet as a group roughly a week before these sessions. So if you've seen these sessions before or participated in a previous Share.Solve.Evolve series, we have already talked about or identified some topics that we want to kind of kick off today. So you'll see me looking off to the left of my screen. I guess you're right, my left, periodically, because I'm looking at notes that we took as we went along. So to kind of kick the conversation off, and we could go a lot of different directions with this today. We only have an hour, so I want to be cognizant of that as we're going through that. But I'm going to start with Brad because he happens to be the one at the top of my notes list. So we're going to go with Brad today. General overview, Brad, you're on a lot of different sessions, seminars. You and I delivered a session recently at NINA SBP down in Clearwater, which I thought went exceptionally well. Just kind of a current state. The industry right now, especially as it pertains to disruptive technology, is moving a million miles an hour. I mean, every day there's some new technology or something new that's being introduced. But if you had to kind of give a 10,000-foot view quick of where you see the industry right now and what we're really tackling, I mean, there's a lot of different challenges, but what do you think the hot topic for Wednesday is? I mean, what are we talking about today?
Oh goodness. So right now within our industry as a whole, we're at this, to steal Malcolm Gladwell, we're at a tipping point, right? We're right at that place where technology is starting to become more widely accepted in a new and different way. That we're no longer as afraid of, well, this is going to be too hard for my dispatchers, and this is coming, let's figure out how to make it work, right? 20 years ago, we were talking about text to 911, and it took a decade at least to start adopting this technology. AI started becoming a thing about a year and a half ago, and there's already integrations. There's already agencies that are adopting this technology. Video is kind of that intermediary between the two. That text was scary. Incident-related imagery now is that thing that's going to potentially be very useful for agencies. And so they're starting to adopt that, and they're seeing that these new technologies maybe aren't as scary. So what I'm seeing as a broad overview is, this understanding that times have changed. COVID showed us that technology can be useful, can be helpful, can help our staffs. So now it's how do we implement it? How do we use it? How do we employ it in a way that helps our people do their job better and easier? And that's kind of the direction in the next 5 years. That's what we're pushing, is simplification, unification, and better service delivery because of it.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, Brad. Michelle, I want to go to you next. And again, reading off my notes, I think this is a good segue off of Brad's comment about incident-related imagery. You talked about the Jenga puzzle, integrating services. You were one of the first, I think, in the nation to really start coming up with a plan and a program for bringing in streaming media, video, those kind of things into the center. Do you have any quick updates for what's going on with that? And I know we could have a whole separate conversation on imagery and things coming into the center, but where are you at currently with that initiative, and how has it been received by your folks and by the community at large?
Sure. So, the Jenga puzzle is, we have all of these screens, we have all of these applications that we're trying to use, and really trying to figure out how to fully leverage that if they're having to transition between different applications. And so what we've been trying to do is figure out, where are those going to be housed? Where is your text to 911 going to be housed? Where is your non-emergency text, picture, and video going to be housed? Live stream video, all of these things can come in one place, but trying to figure out where the best place to do that is. And, working with our partners to see who's going to be able to make this a solution, working with other industry partners. So is this going to go in a CAD map? Is it going to go in a call handling map? Is it going to be self-standing? And how can we get all of this in one place? So if you're talking about AI, like Brad was mentioning, and you want, some reporting to come in, you want it to kind of come into one centralized place. And so, I think when we're talking about big challenges in the industry, and we have staffing issues, and so how do we leverage technology to alleviate some of the stressors on technology? And I think if we're automating into a central location where they can access everything in one place, that's really been our goal.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, another good segue, Jim, I'll go to you. Michelle mentioned staffing. Recruitment and retention is a huge problem right now, but she also mentioned AI, kind of dovetailing what Brad was talking about initially. But when we talked last week and we were kind of going back and forth about some of the talking points today, you specifically talked about AI fears. And there being this, I don't know if it's a misconception or kind of a feeling. I almost think it's more of an uncertainty. Maybe there's an educational component that's built into that, or maybe we as leaders in the space need to be doing a better job of educating our colleagues about the value here. But you've done some very interesting things in your center with AI. You're still experimenting with more things, but maybe you could expand on that a little bit more, especially as it pertains to how it's addressing staffing concerns in the center.
Yeah, so especially for the fears of AI, and even the vendors we've met at IWCE, they're saying the same thing. We're not turning on the tools we're using to search the World Wide Web for an answer. So it's more of a machine learning. We're telling it where to look, we're telling it what to look for, and we're telling it how to respond. So it makes it a little bit easier for the public when they realize, well, okay, I'm not going out to Thailand or Vietnam to get an answer for my question. I'm getting it from where you point me to. And so what we're doing is we're currently using it just for our admin lines at the moment and our non-urgent calls. And with an online reporting tool, we use the AI to ask the questions, direct the public to where they need to go, whether it's to speak to an officer or to one of our call takers, or even more importantly, direct them to an online reporting system where they can put the report in themselves. And for my staff, it's made it very seamless for them because it's just calls they're not getting yet. Right. And they like that. Most of my staff, I'm pretty sure yours will be the same way. They'd rather handle a 911 call than take an admin call, somebody asking for a report, or in our case, our animal calls reporting feral cats. So I think that we've been able to alleviate their fears by making it very clear what we're trying to do, how the system works, and especially how the system's designed to catch if something bad is going on, how it gets it to a human.
Yeah, absolutely hypercritical. And I think back to the center I was a director of most recently, and the frustration that our folks would have, especially when calls would go into queue, where you get those situations where you got multiple calls coming in at one particular time. But this effort with so many centers across the country, and again, that phrase, doing more with less, it just runs rampant through our industry, because every year it seems like budgets are shrinking and more tasks are being thrown at us to address. But being able to take anything that is not necessarily falling into that exigent or urgent category and being able to leverage technology. I mean, I think back to when I was sitting in the chair 20 years ago as a call taker, and in some cases we didn't even have Google. I mean, we were still using paper map books, and some of these applications, these over-the-top applications that are out there right now that are being used all the time, they weren't available. I mean, we had to do it the old-fashioned way, and that's really where critical knowledge of the area and the jurisdiction in which you worked in was hypercritical. I think that's still a focus for a lot of folks that are hiring today. I mean, you miss that personal touch, the person that knows, what's the other joke we always hear? Oh, you remember where Mac ran into that oak tree 3 years ago? Well, you take a right there. And I mean, we don't really have that as much anymore, but we have technology helping us out in ways that wasn't possible before. So Brad, you talked about fears as well. We go into the adoption side of this, and we talk about, and again, adoption is kind of a weird word, right? Because adoption doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to operationalize this technology tomorrow. In my opinion, adoption is first and foremost education. It's understanding what that specific solution does to benefit or help your folks better do their jobs. It's not a push by the industry or by 911 leadership or PSAP leadership across the country to rapidly operationalize. It's to learn more about that. And I know you're big on education as well. So,
well, there's a couple of things right there that I'm going to unpack just a little bit. One is when we start talking about, geolocation services and understanding where people are, having that original, everybody had to be from this place that knew the red barn, that worked on John Smith's ranch, so they knew exactly all the ins and outs when the cows got lost. Well, I live in a jurisdiction where a trailer in a trailer park costs $1.2 million. So we don't have the luxury of having locals that are willing to work in 911 very often. Now, it does happen, and it's wonderful when you get that. But almost every one of my staff members live or were from somewhere else. That we are doing our interviews virtually. We are doing our tours of our center virtually. We are doing everything that we do with them before they come on site virtually. So when they come and start their job, oftentimes it's their first week in our jurisdiction. So we have to have really good technology to solve that problem, right? We're using really good geolocation data. We're using the clearinghouse to get good point-based locations. We're using our Annie. We're using other pieces of technology to try and improve that. And the big piece when we talk about technology adoption is it is not a throw money at a problem and it'll fix it, right? That you think you're going to get an out-of-the-box technology solution to do these things for you, it's not going to be a thing. But what you need to do is ask the right questions. What is our problems? What are the root causes of the problems that we have? For us, staffing was a big problem for a long time. We've actually only lost one proficient dispatcher in the last 2 years because we started thinking outside the box. Hey, one of the big challenges for my jurisdiction is commute. Everybody that lives here has to live and work potentially an hour and a half, 2 hours away. My IT manager lives 2 hours from our center. And so he comes up, we have an apartment for him, and he can stay for the week. But that's a real hindrance on us. So we started breaking our PSAP into satellite centers. So we have our main center near Aspen, then 20 miles down the road, we have another one. We're putting another one 20 miles past that, and eventually into some of the larger jurisdictions around us. And they all interoperate and interwork. Now, that's a technology solution to a real administrative problem. You have to be able to find what are your problems and how is technology going to help you, not here's AI, have it fix the problem.
And I think a great example of that, and not that any of us want another pandemic or another COVID to come through, but COVID actually, as far as the industry is concerned, opened a tremendous numbers of doors for us. I mean, Alexandria, Virginia, and we've talked about this at sessions before, first in the country to implement a remote call taking model. If you were to ask pretty much any 911 leader prior to COVID, hey, let's develop a work from home model for your staff. I think the reactions that you might get from some of those folks might be a little bit mixed. But now in this post-COVID world, and Brad, you just talked about it, centers being located in different places. These are all things we're getting used. We're acclimating as leaders in the space. We're acclimating to these environments where we recognize that people need to have flexibility. And if we're going to continue to attract good people into our centers, we need to get maybe rid of some of those legacy ideas from way in the past, because we've always done it that way, and start thinking about newer, more valuable ways of doing it. But Michelle, I'll go back to you for a second, and I'm not sure what the staffing situation is in your jurisdiction right now. And I know it's kind of a loaded question, right? And I always tell folks like Brad, hey, if you're fully staffed, probably shouldn't be bragging about that. I mean, it's cool. I'm thrilled for you, but I don't want anybody to come after you, afterwards. But from a staffing standpoint, and as you're starting to see a different demographic of folks applying for these roles and coming in, maybe without a public safety background, is the technology, would you say it's hindering that process? Is it helping that process? In what ways are you seeing technology, especially emerging technology, impacting recruitment and retention for you?
So one of the things we had talked about several years ago was, there is a shift in who we're hiring and who's applying. And, it's not your mama's call center anymore, right? And so we have to actually do some training on phone etiquette and things like that. So one of the things that we talked about is how can we, not in an attempt to make it more difficult, we want to make it easier on the users, but how do we appeal to that more technical generation? You've got your gamers out there, you've got your hackers out there, but how do we make that more appealing? And so if you can do more data reporting, or if you can do anything that's just more tech-based, I think that is a more appealing job than just taking phone calls. And so I think that is a detractor to some people who don't want to be on the phone. I know my kids, they don't talk on the phone. They are texters and they're, FaceTimer. So I think appealing to a more advanced technical group, if you will. I mean, they're born with cell phones in their hands. And then I think the other thing is maybe you talked about it earlier, is that low-hanging fruit. How do we automate some of these other things? your tows, your alarms. I think that's, honestly, it's a necessity. It's what we do, but I think it's kind of boring. They want 911. They want, the excitement and the adrenaline. And so how do we keep the main thing, but also how do we make it appealing to the younger generation?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, something just popped up on my screen as I was going there. No, yeah, I love that. And I think we absolutely have to be more flexible as we're going along. The demand is just out there for it. And I think coming in, I actually asked the center that I worked for initially. I can remember back in the day that we used to train with cards every once in a while. We'd have the Go kit that was set up on a cart that would roll around the operations floor, and twice a year they would do this when they were shutting down CAD to do a restart or something, or to apply updates. And that was when everybody got out the cards. I don't even think centers are really doing that all that often anymore. And I'm not sure if it's our systems are too reliable or there's not a need there, but I think sometimes you do need to have some kind of a contingency plan in place for when bad things happen. But I'm curious to learn more about that sometime as well. But, Jim, I want to come over to you now. And one of the other things that you had talked about, you mentioned early on the ability to take some of that unnecessary traffic away. And you're seeing a lot of success with that right now, the non-exigent traffic. There's going to be a lot of questions, especially from agencies that are looking to consolidate with other centers, that their services are going to have a degradation as they migrate their services into a regional center. I know in Massachusetts, where I am, I was talking to a colleague a couple of days ago, and he's had a couple of folks approach him about migrating their agencies into their centers, but they don't have that person at the front desk anymore in this scenario, answering the call or pouring the coffee or shaking people's hands. I think you've done some consolidation in the past. You've had situations like this where this has happened. How are you approaching that conversation? And how do you think other leaders in the space that are being approached by other public safety partners for this very same situation, what do you think their best way of handling that is when it comes to, this is the kind of service we're able to provide following consolidation?
That's a great question, Jeremy. I think that especially if I had all these tools available when I first consolidated in Charleston, it might have been a little bit easier. But quite honestly, the desk officers don't want to take these admin calls or these non-urgent reports. I lost my wallet. One of my favorite ones anyway is that in our area, if you lost or stolen trash can, you would have to call the 911 center to get an incident number before they'd replace your trash can. But it was, as Brad says, you got to know what the problem is. So it wasn't until we started taking a deeper dive into what the problem was, and as soon as we found out we're giving incident numbers for lost trash cans, that we stopped that. So you have to know what the problem is. And then, but I think as we evolved with our AI solution, we went to the law agencies and say, look, here's the deal. you can help us figure out an AI solution to this, or I could just transfer those calls to your duty officer and let him handle it. So in a consolidation environment, if you think about that as going in and saying, hey, we can come up with a solution that's going to work for us holistically, it's going to make life easier for your people. It's going to free up your people as well as my people. That's the benefit of that.
Yeah, that's
No,
huge.
great.
One of the things that, tacking onto that, we realized really quickly, same kind of thing. Those places where we don't realize we're getting a lot of that volume, right? For us, we started working on building, and we're in the middle of building it right now, auto attendance for our front counters. So we have each one of the front counters for all of our police departments going through an AI chatbot that it answers as a, hi, you've reached the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. How can I help you? It tells you what it is and it transfers to dispatch, tells you to hang up and call 911 if it's an emergency so we can get location data. It transfers to the officer that's working on that issue, or just creates an email to go out to all the front counter clerks that can then handle whatever situation's needed. But it gives us a problem that we're solving, because we didn't know almost all of those calls, people would get stuck in this call tree hell and then end up with us anyhow and frustrated. So if we can handle that first, that's helpful. Now, Michelle brought up something about, these younger people coming in. Something I say every single time: 5 years. In 5 years, we will be hiring today's 8th graders, right? And how do we set up an organization that's going to be prepared for their unique skill sets? So some of the things that we play with is like this. This is the X-Real AR Pro Air Pro 2s. It's an augmented reality glasses that we are actually working on right now, using as our screens for our PSAP. We're trying to figure out, can we use this as a single monitor with a laptop to alleviate monitors, to alleviate the need to be in a central individual spot with a console? Can they move around and see? Can they interact in a different way in their work environment just by changing where they're looking at their data? We're also going out to RFP, request for proposal, on a new CAD system that we're going to be putting in there. We want mappable keys. We want to be able to tab through visual data rather than tables, rather than units, so that we can see all the information. And we want to put it on a PlayStation or an Xbox controller. So our daily dispatching turns into Grand Theft Auto, right? That we can see a map, they can react to the information, and they can do it in a way that they're making intuitive leaps in their judgment instead of trying to have a sight picture from tables. So those are the ways that we're going to really start interesting people as they're coming into this field. Now, we'll still have keyboards, we'll still have mice, we'll still have those things, we'll still have monitors for those who are not comfortable with these new technologies. But man, if we have the availability of this stuff and it's possible, why in the world would we not at least try it?
And we could probably have a separate conversation on gamification, which you and I have talked about. On a side note, we can probably do a separate conversation, but I love the look on Jim's face when you pulled out those glasses. He just about fell over in his chair there, so I thought that was great. But
to Brad's point, if I could, you're not doing that today. You're planning that for the future.
Yeah.
And even the steps we're all taking today, and I heard Michelle say it earlier, we can't have them looking at 15 different screens.
Right.
So the first step is, okay, how do we get it down to a few screens so that when we're ready to move to this type of solution Brad's talking about, it makes it an easier move. We're transitioning. We're not just jumping into it.
Yeah. And sorry, Brad, looks like you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Well, it's that idea of that single pane of glass, right? That single pane of glass. If we can get our industry to one display, one thing that does all the things, our phone, our radio, our CAD, our RMS, everything is on one screen. Get a projector, throw it up there at 140 inches, who cares? But get it all on one space where they can interact with one mouse, one keyboard, one piece. That is a massive change in our operations automatically.
So, Michelle, let me throw something to you real quick here, and this is where the conversation's going to get, we can really start thinking outside of the box here, what I think is going to be the fun part of the conversation. I would love to say to everybody watching on the session today that we've figured out the exact things that you need to be saying to your elected officials and appointed officials to get them to do all these things and make your center run exactly the way that you want it to run, but we know that's not going to work. But look, talking to the three of you, By the way, we could probably have a side conversation on that if you want some pointers. Maybe I'll help you out with it, but I don't know if we can solve it here today in another 30 minutes. But next year, if you can believe it, next year, 15 years from then, it'll be 2040, which is just, I mean, when you start, there was a joke, I think it was on social media. It said something like, somebody told me something about 20 years ago, and I thought about 1980, and it was like, no, that wasn't 20 years ago. It was a lot further back than that. But 2040, you guys had to think about, and Michelle, I'll start with you. What does the 911 landscape look like in 2040, 16 years from now? With these things that we're talking about right now, if things go the way that we kind of think they're going to go, and I know I'm going to get a very interesting answer from Brad on this, but I'm going to start with Michelle. What do you think that the PSAP of 2040 looks like? What does it look like to you?
Well, I feel like, centralizing maps was kind of a 1985 answer after listening to Brad, So I do think it's going to have to be incremental change. But I think the first thing that stands out to me is, how do we get dispatchers to not be transcriptionists into CAD? So if we're just scribing and writing down everything that they say, how can we, and Brad and I have talked about this in Future Think a lot, how do we get them to be, to have the time to be thinkers and decision makers and resource deliverers, rather than scribing out everything that's being said on the radio? And so there is technology now that I know that we've been looking at too on transcription, and can that transcription turn into CAD language? I mean, if it can transcribe into one language, it can transcribe into another language, and then does it have to be English, Spanish, Latin, whatever? Can it be a CAD language? And so I think we need to think about rethinking what that job is going to look like, in terms of, I can provide resources, I can be a support to the field units in a different way rather than a documenter. So I think that's the big one that I see first and foremost. But I think the mapping solutions are going to be changing how they work with your CADs. I know we talked at SBP last year about, if the systems can take unit locations and do that for you, we don't have to document that anymore. That could be automated. So what is it that we can do as an industry to really be the support person in a different way than we've been before, in terms of changing unit locations, keeping your status board up to date? That can all be automated when the day is done.
And
so
I was going to say, to your point about support too, and support roles, maybe the more appropriate question would be, have we solved 911 reclassification by 2040? Are our folks recognized as true public safety practitioners and providers and professionals like they should be? Have we solved that in 16 years? That might have been the more appropriate question.
And I think if we change and we do a good job at documenting in job descriptions and do our part in management to make sure that all of that is memorialized, I think that will help, especially as we, make this more technology. I mean, our fire department has Samantha, I think is her name, where she dispatches the initial dispatch. So if you can have a voice on the radio, if you can have transcription coming in that turns into CAD language, then, we've been talking about, we can't throw all this technology at people in our centers because it's just too much. But if we're reallocating those duties, we actually can give them better tools for quality information, reducing risk and things like that. And so I think changing that job description, changing the job function that keeps up with technology will help with that reclassification as well.
Nice. Thanks. Jim, Charleston County, 2040. Of course, you'd only be 25 at that point, so I don't know if you can really speak to that. Charleston County, 2040. Here's another one for you, and we probably don't have enough time, but I'll ask the question. Next generation 911, is it fully deployed across the country at that point? Maybe it's in Charleston County, but what's Charleston County look like in 2040?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Jeremy. I mean, and my colleagues, I know, have said the same thing I've been saying. We're way past next generation 911. Next generation 911 is already passing us by.
Yeah.
So I think 2040, at least in Charleston's case, I hope we're way past next generation 911. There'll still be some laggards that'll be still coming along, but I think we're past that. But I think that to Michelle's point, I think our people are more data analysts than they are telecommunicators. I think that the future of 911 really is more sensors, wearables, things like that are sending alarms and data. And I think we're going to be using some type of AI component to help us weed through all that data. If you can think of a sensor and a wearable and a signal to 911 that something has occurred, and you're able to then automatically access the closest cameras and the information that goes with that and the closest units. I mean, all of that stuff comes together in 2040. That's my prediction.
Love it. Now, if all of you on the call didn't think that I intentionally saved the last comment on this particular segment for Brad, Brad, I've seen the movie Minority Report, and maybe I'm dating myself a little bit because I did do a presentation, I think, was it last year or something, where I had the Tom Cruise slide up and he was doing his thing. And I'm like, how many know what this movie is? And somebody said, Mission Impossible? I said, no. Top Gun? No. I said, all right. I took for granted that people knew what it was. But Minority Report, if you haven't seen that movie, go check it out sometime. But the things that are going on in that movie, hand tracking, eye tracking, haptic feedback, being able to, I mean, I screw around. I've got I test a lot of new technologies, probably a lot like you, Brad. Got that Meta 3 at home, and I'm working with that. And I set up a virtual template for my office and everything else. And I'm PSAP 2040 for you. Where are we at?
Oh, goodness. So there's all kinds of different things. When you start going anywhere past about a 10-year mark, it's all conjecture, right? It's all us imagining. And that's my favorite place. For me, one of the things that I think is most realistic and is going to happen is that narrowing of our ability to provide equitable service. One of the things that we're already starting to see is that a lot of this technology is the direct language translation with transcription, the potential voice-to-voice translations, those kind of things are communities that are the least serviced right now because of those equity gaps are going to start closing. So we're going to start seeing a much better equity between all of our different communities. We're going to start seeing a lot better reaction to things that are happening. Now, I'm so glad Jim started talking about sensors. Sensors is a huge, huge thing, right? As quantum sensing gets better, as more people have data around them all the time, the more information we're going to be able to start getting. And we're going to start reacting to calls long before we get a phone call. We are going to be reacting to calls for service from the data around us, from the sensors, from the smart buildings, from the webcams, from the street cams, from all of these different pieces. And we're going to know about things, and the victim will call later. And we're like, yeah, we've already got them there. We're on our way. Okay, great. You're going to go talk to this officer. We're going to assign them to you, and you can see who they are, kind of like Uber when they get there for you. There's all kinds of that's going to be available. But even one step further, if you start looking at the medium to large PSAPs right today, have supervisors that are sitting back and they're listening. They're reading calls. They're observing what's happening. They're listening to what the dispatcher is saying, and they're making tweaks here and there. They see a big call come in. They tell everybody, bring your calls into this one call for service. They are listening to the radio traffic to see if it makes sense. Well, what if we did that one step removed? If your radio channel is being monitored by artificial intelligence and it has automation that it's actively hearing, Engine 61 is on scene and it does that in your CAD system. Now your dispatcher is that one step removed, that they are able to be that analyst, that they are able to look at what's happening on their screens, and they're able to verify accuracy and create those incident management pieces that your call takers can listen to by reading and looking and seeing all the decision trees that are happening on 5 calls at once, and bumping the AI where it needs to go on those non-critical calls. So the critical call that you do get can be sent directly to that analyst that can handle it specifically, so that 911 is doing the thing we do best, which is helping those in the biggest need get the right help at the right times. And all the rest of this is to facilitate that person who's in dire need gets what they need when they need it.
Acknowledging the amount of time that we have today, and we joked, the 4 of us joked a couple of days ago, it's like we only have an hour, and it's like, well, we could talk for a lot longer than that. But I've been reading up recently on this HMI, which is the human machine interface, and I'm sure the 3 of you have been reading stuff. But this one company out there that's going to have a wearable pin device, which they're calling it a cell phone killer. They're basically saying that these devices that we carry around, we won't even carry these around anymore because these wearable devices will do all of that work for us. So, and a lot of times, you read these things and you're like, oh, okay, I can see that. But think about the way that things from a technology standpoint, think about what you were doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago versus where you are now, and how far-fetched a lot of the things that you're doing now. I mean, my wife just got that new AI phone, and we're going to be going to Europe in a month or so, and you could basically, do all kinds of different real-time, on-device identification. It blows my mind. It's mind-boggling what we can do now. But I do want to circle back to the original thought process of the session today, and that was dealing with technology adoption challenges and really getting some feedback from the three of you as to, you can have folks in your centers, leadership specifically, that are very supportive and very open to learning about how emerging and disruptive technology will benefit public safety, not only at the PSAP level, but certainly extended out to our public safety partners as well. But some of the common challenges, and there are many, I think politics is a big piece of that, right? You can go in with this great story about why these things are important and why we should look to implement them, and the wins that other centers across the country have had and the serious injuries or fatalities that have likely been prevented by using this. But Jim, let me start with you on this. Where do you feel folks where's the best place for these folks to start relative to that conversation? If they're in a center, they're looking at AI, they're looking at these other emerging and disruptive technologies, but they don't think that they've necessarily got their elected and appointed officials sold on it. What are some recommendations you can give them for maybe starting that dialogue and hopefully doing so successfully?
I need to say this in a very non-aggressive way, but as I challenge my leadership, I simply put it, I'm not going to be the one explaining to the mom that I didn't answer her baby not breathing call because I was answering a call about feral cats. And I think when you put it in perspective, that what we do is emergent, yet many of our local elected leaders especially don't understand all of the other stuff that we take on. And we need to get back to doing what our role is emergencies. And I think once we've reoriented the leadership, and it's as I explained to them, I don't want to not answer those calls on feral cats. Those are important to people. But I don't think that our emergency resources should be dedicated to that. And this is an alternative to that.
Nice. Michelle, thoughts?
Sure. So we're pretty fortunate here in Chandler. We have a lot of support, and I've been very blessed to have that. So I think, messaging, just generally speaking, in messaging, people don't know what AI is versus machine learning and things like that. I probably couldn't explain it very well myself, but I know, in the real-time crime center world, one of the messaging trends there is instead of using AI, advanced analytics. It's just a messaging tool that's just not so scary. And so doing that, I think the other thing, incremental change. So if we can make little changes, and one of the things we've been focused on this year is how do we automate things and sharing the why behind it. We want to reduce this call volume because XYZ and whatever your message is. So, in our agency, we talk a lot about starting with why, but so I think that messaging is there. And then I think when you start seeing the benefits of automation, then you can make some more skips down the road because you've earned some of that credibility. And so when we start talking about, I think one of our big issues in the 911 industry is first in, first out on the 911 calls. And so how do we get the system to be smarter? Because we have a tree on fire, we are now flooded, and Uncle John is having a heart attack. So how do we get that smart, that AI, whatever it is, upstream in the delivery to say, hey, we've got a live one here, and whatever that looks like, shooting, listening to shots fired. There's technology out there that can sense heart attacks. So how do we get that upstream to say, we're going to jump over the 12 traffic collisions on the freeway that are in the queue, and we're going to notify you? And can we notify the call taker that says, we heard the sound of shots in the background, or just some kind of keyword alerting like we do on the transcription, the keyword alerting. And so, dispatchers, call takers, no matter how long you do it, you kind of have that, when you get a live one, you're kind of like, whoo, and you have to kind of get your sea legs longer. The longer you're on, that transition process happens a little faster. But could that help in terms of wellness, reduce the super high adrenaline pump to down, and now we're working the call. So if you have that keyword alerting, could it potentially have some wellness effect to say, this is going to be a good call. We're going to have to manage it, and let's get in the group faster. But then also, the community is getting in. The highest priority calls are being delivered. So I think messaging we want, just like Jim was saying, we want to know about the heart attack. We want to know about those drownings sooner than later. And so how do we do that?
I'm always envious of folks like yourself with executive boards and reporting authorities that are supportive, because there are so many centers across the country that don't have that support, or maybe it's not even that they don't have that level of support, but there's priorities on other things and not recognizing the critical role that 911 plays. It's just tough. So I always envy folks like yourself, Michelle, for that reason. Brad, comments on that?
Yeah, for us, again, we were very fortunate that we have a great leadership group that helps us, but it's finding their win, right? One of the things that we knew, we're leasing space from one of the fire departments, and we were going to have to vacate by 26, and we were going to have to build a PSAP. And so it was going to be $15 million minimum out here to build that. And I said, hey, instead of spending $15 million, why don't I spend 250 for each one of the satellites, and you give me 5 or 6 million for technology? Well, now they're seeing, instead of a $15 million bill, they're seeing a $6 million bill. That's significantly different, right? Or they've got, you look for those simple wins. We use 8 monitors. That's $1,600 a position. That you multiply that out. These are 4. If I pay $400 for these, I might be able to save us 4 times per position what we're spending. And so they say, yeah, try it. I mean, shoot, if you save $1,200 for each one of our positions, go for it. And those are the places where we look. There was a large company that we were trying to look at GPS. And I said, why don't I look for some other places? And I found a really cool thing where I could use Garmin and GPS from DoD contractors. And they did this great idea. And it was like, hey, we could save, it would cost us 20% of what it was going to cost. Now, can I take that other 80% and reallocate it to something else I'm trying? And what they start seeing is they trust you, that you're, one, being fiducious. You're trying to make sure that you're not spending everybody's money, and you're creating solutions for the problems that they're looking for. And if you can do those 2 things, say, I'm going to find what you're trying to do and save you money while we're doing it, they'll say yes to you half the time. And half the time is 100, 50% of the time it works 100% of the time, right? It's that piece where it's so much more helpful for you if you can get that yes.
And we could probably have a separate conversation just on political negotiation tactics and getting people to kind of feel you out for what you think is really important. But Jim and I had an opportunity to talk about this. We were in a session at IWCE a couple of days ago, and we were talking about. I said, and periodically, certainly where I'm here at Entrado, I'll put the director hat back on periodically. And I said, one of the things that always frustrated me as a director is it seems like the majority of the time when a decision is being made on something, and it doesn't even need to be technology, it can be a budget, a line item on a budget, or a hiring, whatever it happens to be. We're so laser focused on the 1% that could get us into trouble that we've totally abandoned the idea of the 99% benefit that's going to result from it. And, so it's that kind of thinking, I think, that really stifles a lot of the progress for our profession. And you've got folks out there like yourselves that, we can go out and pontificate and advocate as much as we possibly can. But at the end of the day, you still have folks out there that are like, now, what if? And I'm like, but what if you don't? But what if what if we don't do this? What if we don't innovate? What if we don't look at different ways of doing this, and we continue to just do things the way that we've always done them? I mean, how do we grow? How do we benefit as an organization? So the 3 of you have come up with some great ideas, and I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer about this. But recognizing time, Andrew, I want to go to you real quick. Have you had? I saw that the Q&A thing had a little spot here, which means that somebody might have put something in there, but I wasn't able to read it on my monitor. Do we have any questions?
So again, would like to encourage everybody with a question, use that Q&A feature within the Teams there and go ahead and enter them there. Do have a couple questions here. One, well, first, love this conversation. It's awesome, right? And I'm the AI geek within the marketing group. So whenever we start talking AI, I always perk up, and I love hearing that. So somewhat related, this question is great as we talk about some of these far-flung advanced technologies here. How can concerns surrounding data privacy and security, and I think I'll add, AI bias, influence the willingness of public safety agencies to adopt new technology and solutions? Big, broad question there, but I guess, there's still a lot of, certainly on the AI front and on the security front, right? Oh my goodness, where's my data going? Who's got access to it and what's going on? So maybe we start there.
Yeah, especially when you figure the public-private network side of things, which we're not going to go down that road today, but
yeah.
Jim, do you want to start that off?
So I think many of the solutions that are being offered now, the private companies, the big names we would normally see in AI, they're not willing to sell that to 911. They don't want to take on the liability of the emergency piece. What we're seeing is that those companies are selling to our trusted partners that we are already using. So we already have those information security. Again, we're trying not to mention vendor names, so I'm trying not to get down that road, but you can picture in your mind, we've already got those in place with our CAD vendors, our CHE vendors. So by using the AI through those vendors, we've already have those cybersecurity and information security measures in place.
Well, and you can also create the AI based off of your own data, right? That based on what you're doing, you can keep a closed box solution. That it is your data, your stats, your information, everything that you fed into it. You can take a screenshot of the world of knowledge that it had, say, this is where it stops. Everything that I put into it stays put, and it will learn based on what we're doing. Now, just like everything else we're talking about, this takes time. When you get an AI solution, it's not once you plug it in, it's going to work perfectly. Especially transcription will not work perfectly first off. No matter who you pay, no matter what you do, it's going to be rough because it has to learn and you have to teach it. And depending on how you choose to do that, whether the companies you're hiring are doing that for you, or your staff are doing that, or you personally are having to work on all of that, there's a build-up process. But you can determine how you want your data shared. Nice part for all of us early, bleeding edge, tip of the spear adopters, yes, us mavens are looking at this. We don't really have to worry about it as much because nobody knows what it's doing yet. And so it's us just trying it to see, because, is it going to be a problem? Is having, what of our data isn't allowed to be seen? If it's CGIS, okay, great. How do we partition that off? But the rest of it, if it's been over the radio and you have your FOIA, whatever your requirements are for your agencies, there's some stuff that's already open record. Well, that can go out there, right? So what do you need to partition? What do you need to be careful with? And what you'll find is an awful lot of it, like up in Saginaw County, they're building an AI scrubber for their own policy. So they've got their policies and procedures and everything else, and they have a bot that their people can type in just saying, how do I do a traffic stop? And it will bring up all of their own data and start responding to you. So it's just huge, amazing advantages on stuff that's internal. You don't even have to worry about it going anywhere else. It's just your stuff, right? So everybody's scared about something that doesn't necessarily have to be part of the equation at all.
Yeah. Michelle?
I think foundational data sharing agreements. So what you have existing today in your systems, and making sure that you know who has that data to begin with, and then what the parameters that it should be used. So starting with that, I think, is important. And then as you do test these things out, then you kind of grow that. But I think, Andrew, you mentioned bias too. I think there is a lot of concern about that. And, we've seen that in the real-time crime center world as well. And but I think when we talk about learning, it's kind of us that are learning. So, in our bot that we have that's listening and answering the calls and diverting calls, then we go in and we say, what do we miss? So we're the ones actually kind of learning how to set it up and then it simply follows a flow chart. It does what we tell it to do. So
Yeah.
we learn what the community is reporting, and then we make our adjustments to the tool. And so I think inherent in that specifically, I don't see bias. And there could be something that comes up in the future, but we're not seeing it right now. It is a very simple, if this, then that.
Awesome.
Well, and that's a really good point in that algorithms, right? It's that advanced analytics. This is not generative AI where it's like invent a new friggin' thing, right? We're not telling it to just go out there and look at every Reddit chat bar and then respond to stuff, because that's going to be, the most offensive thing you've ever met. But at the same time, these are intelligent analytic systems. These are things that you're controlling what it's doing. It's not going to go rogue and take over your system. It's not going to go howl and kill somebody, right? It is going to respond the way you're looking at it. Now, there will be times that we don't expect the outcome. It's like, oh, bears we need to deal with differently here in Aspen than we do with cats and dogs. We need to change the way it's asking the question. That's because of us, not because of it, right?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'd love to entertain another question, but we really only have about 3 minutes left here, Andrew, per my count. I'm seeing something in the Q&A field, though. I don't want to open that field up for fear of losing the four of you on my screen. But
you're good. There's nothing in there. Don't worry about that.
Okay. All right. So let's kind of, we got about 3 minutes left. Let's go to kind of closing comments. First of all, again, on behalf of Intrado and everybody watching, I wanted to thank the three of you for participating and being a part of this today. I love you guys anyways, but I could talk about these things all day. I know you could talk about them all day, and maybe we'll be able to do another session at some point. But if you had to give your 2 cents to somebody starting out in the industry today, somebody that's relatively fresh, especially somebody that's moving into a leadership role for the first time, maybe they've been with 911 for 5 or 10 years, and now they've got an opportunity to be a supervisor or a director. And we know that technology is such a big part of what we do. Even 15, 20 years ago when we started, but even more so now. What's your closing advice as we leave the session today for those folks as they're starting out these roles? And Michelle, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I would say get into a learning mindset. So this is not going to, we're not going to arrive. So be in a learning mindset, and then recognize your strengths and weaknesses. So I think this is a fun panel for me, because historically I've been more like Brad in personality and let's go. But hanging out with my good friend Jim over here, he's a lot more methodical, and he thinks 10 years down the road on the impacts and just the 360-degree outlook. And so you can get there. You can be a risk taker. You can be an early adopter and a visionary. But it's scaled and methodical. And so I think figuring out, what you're capable, the environment you're working in, and adjusting to that while you learn. I think that would be maybe my 2 cents.
Love it. Jim, how about your 2 cents?
I think everything we've talked about today, whether you've recognized it up front or not, is about the people that we're privileged to lead. And I think if you always keep their well-being and the work they do in mind, I think that you'll be a great leader.
Well put, Jim. Thank you, sir. Brad, 2 cents only, not a quarter.
Man, I don't know why I have to follow that. So, I'm very excited for the things that are coming, for the ways that we're going to be able to help our people, for the cultures that are changing. And if you're open to learn and explore, and you're keeping that focus on your staff, their wellness, you're going to be amazing. Answer your problem or solve your problems with not throwing money and not throwing people at it. Solve it by equipment, processes, or management changes, and you'll be amazing.
Love it. Well, the three of you have been awesome. Again, I want to thank all of you for being here today and taking time out of your busy schedules to do this. Again, I know I speak for Andrew and the rest of the Intrado team when I say how much we appreciate that. I want to remind everybody watching today, if you enjoyed the session today, which we hope that you did, next month's Share.Solve.Evolve session is going to be celebrating National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. So we're still finalizing plans for that, but we're very excited about what that session is going to look like. So we absolutely hope that you'll tune in for that. I don't think we've finalized, Andrew, the exact date yet, but we're it'll be during National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, and we're very excited about that. But the Share.Solve.Evolve webinar series is designed to educate you and others in the profession about all things 911, all things PSAP and ECC, and brings to the table industry-leading folks like the folks that you see here to talk about a variety of different topics. And if there's a specific topic that you would like to see us talk about in one of these upcoming sessions, please feel free to reach out to me or to Andrew or another member of the Intrado team to let us know. But for Andrew, for Intrado, and the group that we have here today, thank you all so much for being a part of this. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we look forward to the next session with all of you. Take care, everybody.